Good afternoon, students. So this week I'm going to go over peer review. What exactly is peer review? Peer review is what we are going to be doing in the week 5, week 7, week 9, and week 11 forums. And so because we're going to be doing peer review for the rest of this class after the week 3 food game forum, then it's very important for you to know what exactly is peer review. So right now in week 3, I'm going to go over what is a peer review. So this is going to be a really long lecture, so I suggest that you watch it in 20-minute chunks. Alright, so here is what is a peer review. So how are we going to do the week 5, week 7, week 9, and week 11 peer review forums? Well, that's what today's lecture is going to answer, that question of how we're going to do those forums and what is a peer review. So we're going to go over the purpose of peer review, the benefits of peer review, constructive criticism, how to receive feedback, how to give feedback, how to ask for feedback, how to do the peer review forum week, and how peer review is used in the real world. Aren't these fun? Many students have trouble with the peer review forums. In this class, the peer review forums are the week 5, 7, 9, and 11 forums. In this presentation, I will define what peer review is. I'll talk about the importance of peer review, and I will give students templates of model peer reviews that you can follow and that you can use in the next few forums. Many students worry that they are not strong enough writers to give constructive feedback on other people's papers, or they may hurt other students' feelings. But all you have to do when you do a peer review is to be positive and open, and think of peer review as a fun activity, and provide the best feedback that you can. You don't have to be a professional writer to be a peer reviewer. Look at peer review as a way to improve your writing grade. Also, turn in your posts early before Wednesday. Do not try to turn in your posts on Sunday because then no one has time to give you feedback. So what is a peer review? A peer review is when you review another student's paper to give it feedback so that your classmate can get a better grade. A peer review is also when other students review your paper so that you can get a better grade. What is the purpose of a peer review? So there are different kinds of feedback that you need to pay attention to. So the kinds of feedback you can give in the forum is you can give appreciation feedback. In appreciation feedback, you give feedback where you compliment somebody's paper, where you tell somebody, wow, you have a great thesis statement, you have great sentence structure. Or if you're not sure about what mistakes they made, you could just say, I totally agree with your topic. It's such a controversial topic, but you present it in such a clear manner that I can understand and grasp it. And so the good thing about appreciation feedback is that you give the other writer confidence. Mentoring feedback. Mentoring feedback is if the other person asks a question like, what is a thesis statement? I'm not sure if my thesis statement is okay. So when you hand in your rough drafts, you can write questions at the bottom of your rough draft like, do you think my thesis statement is okay? What do you guys think of my topic sentences? You can write that at the end of your rough draft. And then when other students answer your questions, and you would say something like, I think your rough draft, your thesis statement really needs work because your thesis statement needs to be at the end of the first paragraph. So when you give advice that answers these questions, That's known as mentoring feedback, because you're mentoring that student and helping that student to improve his paper. And so you can ask for help. So if you need help or you think that there are weaknesses in your rough draft, simply put the questions at the end of your rough draft, and then other students can then answer those questions to the best of their ability. So that's known as mentoring feedback, because you're mentoring someone. Coaching feedback is when you give feedback to somebody's rough draft and they didn't ask any questions, and then you come up on your own with advice on how that person can improve their paper. So that's known as coaching feedback. The last kind of feedback is evaluation feedback. Evaluation feedback is when I give you your grade. That's teacher feedback. That's when I color code your entire paper and then give you feedback, and then I grade your paper in the final draft. So that's known as evaluation feedback. And so evaluation feedback is the only kind of feedback you're not going to do, because your role is not to grade each other's papers. Your role is simply to help each other. So you're just going to do the three. You're going to be doing appreciation feedback, mentoring feedback, and coaching feedback. The last kind of feedback, evaluation feedback, that's what I'll be doing. So a catchy way to remember how to give feedback: ACE. So A, appreciation feedback; C, coaching feedback; E, evaluation feedback. So that is called the ACE method of giving feedback. So in appreciation feedback, you compliment other student papers. In coaching feedback, you give suggestions on how others can improve their paper. And evaluation feedback is that you pay attention to my teacher's feedback and you remember to include your feedback, when you correct your paper, to include the feedback and to correct the paper in your final draft. What are the benefits of peer review? Peer review builds teamwork. Why do a peer review? Peer review allows students to clarify their own ideas as they explain them to classmates and as they formulate questions about their classmates' writing. Also, peer review helps reinforce your writing process, because as you evaluate or coach other people's papers, your writing skills and your knowledge of thesis statement, sentence structure becomes reinforced. And so we do a thesis statement so that we can all work together to everybody improve their grade. So as you look over, after the week is over, the peer review week is over, so next week is week 4. You're going to do your rough draft. So include all of the corrections and the feedback that, let's say for example, I say in my teacher feedback, your thesis statement needs to be the last sentence of the first paragraph. Then when you submit your rough draft in week 4, you have to make sure that your thesis statement indeed is the last sentence of the first paragraph. For example, and if I say, for example, use a comma after when fanboys is in the middle of a sentence, then you have to make sure that anytime you have a coordinating conjunction like and, but, for, nor, yet, so, and it's in the middle of 2 sentences, you have to make sure you make those corrections. And when you give feedback, you help improve other students' grades, and you gain confidence in your writing skills. And you build student investment in writing. So when we do peer review, we are building a writing community, because we become a community of learners as we learn from each other. And so peer review, as I said before, gives us teamwork, or it gives students opportunities to learn from one another and to think carefully about the role of writing in the course. And students learn from each other. because stronger writers will then coach, mentor weaker writers throughout the process of peer review. And weaker writers then learn from the stronger writers. And if you happen to be the weaker writer, that's okay. Even if your grammar is not that good, you can still comment on how you like the topic, or you can comment on how whether or not you understood the other person's paper or not. Peer groups learn from each other. Peer review allows students to clarify their own ideas as they explain them to classmates and as they formulate questions about their classmates' writing. This is helpful to writers at all skill levels, in all classes, and at all stages of the writing process. Classmates can tell each other where your argument is weak, where you may need extra description, or where you have too much description. And so peer review helps you discover the weaknesses and strengths in your paper. Peer review provides professional experience for students by having their writing reviewed. Peer review is the process by which professionals in the real world publish their papers. It's how managers and coworkers provide feedback in the workplace, and it's a skill with practical application. And so when you compliment, when you show appreciation, so remember the 3 kinds of feedback you're going to give. You're going to give appreciation feedback, in which you compliment somebody's work. You're going to give coaching feedback, where you give advice. And you're going to give mentoring feedback, where you help somebody in the weaknesses of their paper. So coaching and mentoring feedback are very similar. What are some misconceptions about peer review? Don't worry if you are not a good writer. So I've had many students tell me, but Professor H, I'm not a good writer. I've always gotten low grades in my writing classes. Or some student would say, but English is not my first language. How can I possibly help a native speaker with their paper? So don't worry if you're not a good writer. If you can't think of anything to coach, you can always just compliment what you like about somebody's paper. You do not have to be a good writer, so even if you feel weak in English, you can still tell other students how they can improve their writing. After all, we critique movies, don't we, without being movie directors and without having a degree in film studies. So why can't we critique other student papers? Everybody is a backseat driver. We all have an opinion, right? So as long as you have an opinion, you can give your opinion on other student papers. Don't worry if you think your English grammar stinks. All the students are in the same boat. If you don't see any grammar mistakes, or you feel weak in grammar, you can just comment on essay structure instead. And no, doing peer review, you are not doing the teacher's job. You are helping your peers get a better writing grade. So think of peer review as a kind of teamwork task or community tasks that you are all participating in to help each other get a good grade and to reinforce your writing process. And no, nobody's going to laugh at your comments. I've been teaching writing for many years, and I have used this peer review technique for many decades. And students are not offended when you correct their mistakes, as long as you do it gracefully and you make actionable suggestions. Remember, when we are correcting the paper, we are not correcting you or your personality or your character. My classmates will laugh at my peer review statements. In all the years I've been teaching, no student has ever laughed at another student's peer review. That's usually because everybody is so busy being so nervous about themselves that they don't have the energy to laugh at someone else's peer review statements when they're too busy being nervous about their own peer review statements. And so, what are the misconceptions of peer review? Some students think they're not good writers. So you don't have to be a good writer to be a good peer reviewer. You could just compliment on what other people have done. You don't have to be good at grammar to do a peer review. You could just comment on essay structure. You don't have to be afraid of giving a peer review because everybody is in the same boat. Everybody is nervous. And just think of it as a way in which everyone can improve their writing grade. How do we give effective feedback? So ineffective feedback is something like, oh, this paper is boring, or this is a really good paper, or this paper sucks. But in each case, if I say the paper sucks, the paper is really good, or the paper is boring, but you don't say why. So even if I say the paper is really good, you want to know why. Why is it good? So I can replicate it again in my next paper. So how do we give effective feedback so that people can actually use that feedback as an action? So you need to give actionable. So what you want to give is constructive criticism, actionable suggestions. So those are the two new words you're going to learn. Constructive criticism means that we don't just say it sucks. We give criticism that people can actually put into action. Remember, your feedback are just suggestions. They're not orders. They're not something ordained by, some higher authority. Okay? So they're just suggestions from your peers of how you can improve your paper. So, constructive criticism. What is constructive criticism? Constructive criticism is a helpful way of giving feedback that provides specific, actionable suggestions. Rather than just providing general advice, constructive criticism gives specific recommendations on how to make positive improvements. Constructive criticism is clear, to the point, and easy to put into action. So here, the 4 traits of a constructive criticism. So constructive criticism and actionable suggestions are the same thing. Okay, basically, they're tips in which people can put into action. If I simply say the paper sucks, you can't put into action of why it sucks or why the paper sucks because you don't know your areas of improvement. So basically, when you give constructive criticism, you're telling students areas of improvement that they can make in their paper. And then be specific in your suggestions. For example, if I were to say, oh, these sentences are too blah, okay, that doesn't really help. So if you were to say something like, you have too many simple sentences in a row, you need to vary your sentence structure by having one sentence being a compound sentence, one being a complex, and one being, or you could say, you don't have enough transition words. You keep repeating and all the time, and you should have transition words of addition, like therefore, moreover, furthermore. So make actionable suggestions that people can use to correct their paper. So that's why that your advice needs to be specific, you stick to actionable points, and you recommend, you don't assume. And you could do something like a sandwich feedback. In other words, you give somebody something positive, then you give the areas of improvement, and then you end with something positive. That's known as the sandwich method. That way, you don't just bombard somebody with totally negative comments. Then the people get overwhelmed or discouraged. You don't have to be an expert at peer review, nor do you have to be an expert in writing. Simply give actionable suggestions on how other students can improve their paper to make their paper sound better, or to make their paper make more sense to you. So you could say something like, I couldn't understand your paper. What exactly was your main idea? Okay, so you could just, if you didn't understand what somebody wrote, well, that's not good, because the whole purpose of writing a paper is to express a clear message to the reader so that the reader can learn from your essay. Now, if the reader decides that he cannot understand what you're writing, then you need to rewrite your paper. So that's one of the good purposes of peer review, is having an extra set of eyes look at your paper to help you review your paper. Because one of the downsides of when we write our paper, we become too familiar with it, and then we fail to see our own mistakes. usually that has something to do with our ego, because we like to believe that we are perfect. And because of that, we actually don't see our own mistakes. That's very human. You can comment on the topic. So you can start your peer review by commenting, oh, this is such a controversial topic, and I totally agree that your topic, and then you can say, or I disagree. And if you want to disagree, we disagree courteously. So we want to agree to disagree. And so if somebody says something like, President Trump is an awful president because reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, and then you loved President Trump, well, we don't get into a political argument. We just simply focus on, where's your thesis statement? Oh, so you don't like President Trump. Okay, that's your main idea. Okay, I totally understand your main idea. You don't judge what they wrote. You just focus on whether or not that person has a clear message, whether or not the thesis statement is the last sentence of the first paragraph, whether the topic sentences relate back to the thesis. So you can even write about President Biden is the best president, President Trump is the best president. It doesn't really matter. We're not really judging so much, somebody's topic, or we're really focusing on how well somebody wrote their paper so that other people can then understand the paper. And other people can learn from the paper, and also that person can learn how to create a paper with a clear message so that they can succeed in the workplace, and also to improve their writing grade. Here are some things that you can look for. Are all the paragraphs 5 to 7 sentences long? Does he have 3 parts to his essay? Does he have an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, 1 conclusion paragraph? Does he have 1 central idea backed up by supporting paragraphs? Is the thesis correctly placed as the last sentence of the first paragraph? Does his thesis have 3 reasons? And do those 3 reasons become the body paragraphs? Does he repeat his thesis statement as the first sentence of the last paragraph? Does he restate his thesis in his conclusion? Does he have a funnel introduction paragraph or a summary conclusion paragraph? So all of these things are important in essay structure. So when we correct for essay structure only, so before we correct for grammar, we correct for essay structure. And so first of all, that's known as revision. And then after we make sure that the essay structure is fine and coherent, then after that, then we do something proofreading. So we always correct for essay structure first, then we correct for grammar and mechanics second. That's in the rewriting stage that's the last stage of the writing process. And here are some other questions. Does the introduction contain a hook, a bridge, and a thesis statement? Or did the student simply state the thesis in the intro? Do the topic sentences relate back to the thesis? Do the subpoints in the body paragraphs relate back to the topic sentences? Did the writer restate the thesis as the first sentence of the last paragraph? What is the essay about? Does the essay make sense? How can you improve the essay so that it does make sense? Are there any APA errors? Did he include APA citations? Does he include reference citations? How can you make the paper more exciting? And then, after you make sure all of that is correct, last but not least, are there any grammar or punctuation mistakes? And once again, when you compliment other people's work, tell other people what they did right. Give them encouragement, because this instills confidence in others, in your fellow students. It creates community and teamwork, and it makes other students feel good about their writing. Be kind and courteous when you give suggestions on how other people can correct their paper. Think about the well-being of other classmates and how they feel. Follow the golden rule. So how do we receive feedback? So here we are, we've given our feedback, and now it's the end of the week, and now we're looking at the feedback that everybody has given to our paper. How should we react to that feedback? Should we react in a negative way? Oh my God, I'm a terrible writer. Or, oh, this is how I can correct my paper. So you should think of it as, this is the way in which I can correct my paper. And you should think of it as a growth, a way to grow, a way to improve, rather than, oh, I dread what everybody said. Or don't think of it as an attack on your personality, okay? We are all in the same boat. So be a good sport. When someone critiques your work or gives you feedback, just be in good spirits and realize that we are all here to help you, not hurt you. Receive feedback with a spirit of fun and growth. Don't take the feedback personally. Remember, we are correcting the paper, not you. Stay positive. Instead of dreading a peer review, seek out challenges. See it as a way to grow and improve whatever you do. This includes job performance, that you seek out a way to improve your job, a way to improve your paper. So always think and stay positive. When other students give you feedback, or when I give you feedback, stay positive and just use the feedback to fix your paper. Give yourself an A for effort. So even if you get fired from your job, or if you get a bad job review, or if you get a low grade on your paper, those are things that are out of your control. You can't help it if you get a low grade on your paper. We all get low grades. We all have negative things happen to us beyond our control. But it's how we respond or how we react to these events that matter. So no matter what the obstacle, pick yourself up, start over again, try hard, and most importantly, give yourself an A for effort, for it's that second score of A for effort that counts in life. And I know it's easier said than done. It's easy for me to just sit back here with this lecture and say that than actually doing it. So saying it and doing it are two different things, and trust me, this giving yourself an A for effort takes a lot of practice. It really does. But once you get good at it, then you are able to bounce back in a positive manner from obstacles. And research shows that people who stay positive and bounce back fast live longer, happier lives. So give yourself an A for effort. Give yourself an A that you actually tried to write a 5-paragraph essay paper, that you tried, okay? And so in life, that's all we can expect, is to try. We're all mortal. So the second score is what wins. So it's not the first score of F or the negative comments. It's how we respond to adversity, bad news, problems, low grades, that define our character, our integrity, and our inner strength. People who respond well or positively to any kind of obstacle or negativity live long lives. They once interviewed this 120-year-old man, and the reporter said, "What is the secret to your longevity?" And the old man said, "Being able to bounce back from whatever adversity and loving change, being able to adapt, being flexible, giving yourself that second chance, and not beating yourself up over it. Because every time you beat yourself up over something, you're shortening your lifespan. And we don't want to do that, shorten our lifespans, especially if we have children and grandchildren in there, and we want to live to see them have children and their children and that sort of thing. So you got to think about what Betty White did all of her life. She was positive. There was always a smile on Betty White's face. So she lived to be 99 years old and died in her sleep. So that's how everybody should go someday. So make sure that you are that positive person that gives yourself the A for effort. So overcoming, that's how we define who we are. Is that when we overcome adversity, we do it with a smile, and we do it with our chin up and proud, and we give ourselves an A no matter what other people say. So don't be offended. Just have fun with the comments and think of it as a way to improve your paper. And the reason why I'm giving this whole lecture is because in the past, people have become so shy, timid, afraid to give thorough peer review feedback. And so I end up with forums in which people just post their rough draft and leave. And that leads for a very dull, boring, forum. And so that's why I decided to create this PowerPoint so that people don't think of peer review as just like this man pointing, the accusing finger at you saying, your paper stinks. That seems to be the image in people's minds. I guess it goes back to people's first grade teachers or something. So what I want everyone to think of peer review as teamwork. So have fun working together. You're going to have fun in the week 5, week 7, week 9, and week 11 forums. Because in those forums, in the first part of this class, we're just going to focus on learning essay structure. Then the second half of this class, we're going to focus on not just learning essay structure, but we're also going to focus on learning APA. And so APA is American Psychological Association. And so I'm going to go over what is APA in another presentation. So for this first essay, we're just going to focus on essay structure. Now, if you want to include APA in your first essay, that is totally voluntary for you. But if you want to do it just as kind of a practice, because it's not required, the APA is not required for your first essay. So if you just want to do it as a kind of practice run for the second essay, because in the second essay, the APA is going to be required. So if you want to include APA in your paper, you can. And if you have questions about what would be some good sources for my paper, and you're having trouble coming up with sources, that's what another thing I'm going to do in the second half of the class is teach you about credible sources, media literacy, and how to find credible sources. That's a whole nother course altogether, okay? And so you can always email me and ask me anything if you're having trouble with your thesis statement, if you're having trouble with your topic sentences, you're not sure if what you're turning in is correct, you can always email me and we can schedule a one-on-one Zoom session. Like right now, I'm giving my lecture, right? After I finish my lecture, you can then ask me questions, and then we can work one-on-one on whatever it is, whatever assignments that you're having trouble with. So nobody is trying to attack you. So no need to feel scared that people are laughing at your paper or feel threatened by better writers. In this class, peer review is a fun, interactive group activity where a community of learners get together to improve each other's work. Remember, we are correcting the paper, not you. And so here, we are all in this together. Relax and let your hair down. And so think of it as a group project, that we're all working together for your benefit. And think of the forum, the peer review week 5, week 7, week 9, and week 11 forum as a coaching session for your paper, as an opportunity for you to grow in your writing and to grow in your knowledge of the writing process, okay? And each time you give, and you don't have to just give two students, you're required to give 2 students feedback, but if you're a really good writer, you could give 3 feedbacks, 4, 5, you can give more than 2 if you feel inclined. Basically, the more feedback you give to more students, the better you're going to learn the writing process. So as you give feedback to others, just think of suggestions to help others improve their grades. And how you receive that feedback is you want to seek out change. You want to seek out ways in which you actually want to always be in the position of asking others, is this the best way I could do this? Is that the best way I could do that? And even on the job, you would ask your boss, did I do this right? Is this the correct way of doing something? and then your boss would say yes, no, and whatever, and then you would correct whatever it is the boss wants or doesn't want, or whatever it is. When you do your final draft, you just correct whatever it is the teacher wants or the suggestions the students have in order to have a better paper. So think of it, you got to have a growth mindset. In other words, we're all growing and learning. For each time we learn something new, we grow better. So, how to receive feedback at work. If, for example, your boss is giving you advice on your job performance, you should ask yourself, is she coaching me or is she evaluating me? So coaching is when someone is just giving you advice on how to do your job better. Evaluating is when your boss is actually grading you or ranking you on how well you are doing your job. And knowing the difference between the two influences how you react. And for the most part, you should see all of your boss's advice as coaching rather than evaluating. Because if you see everything through the lens of I'm being graded, I'm being ranked, you're going to become very anxious, nervous, and you're going to dread being reviewed. Instead, think of everything, all your boss's advice and all your peer review advice as coaching, as a coaching session, as a way to grow, as a way to adapt, and as a way to improve your job and how you want to do your job in the way your boss or your teacher wants you to do it. So the three kinds of, to sum up, the three kinds of feedback is appreciation, where you compliment someone's work, coaching, where you give someone actionable suggestions, and evaluation, where you're being graded. So be positive when you are coached and have a growth mindset. Be curious on wanting to know how you can improve your job or your paper. Reach out to your boss or your teacher and let him or her mentor you, especially if something is puzzling to you or something is new to you. When you are being evaluated, your boss is grading you on how well you are doing your job. If you think you're going to get fired, or so that's when the boss decides, oh, this person deserves a promotion. No, this person needs extra tutoring. This person should be fired. So that's when you get feedback that's called evaluation. And then when we get evaluated, we act defensive, especially if the evaluation comes out negative. This is why it is important, why you are able to tell if you're being coached or being evaluated. So that if you're on the job, if you ask for frequent advice during the year, not just your annual review, then most likely you will get a lot of coaching. If you just get an annual review, that's most likely a mixture of coaching and evaluation. So that's why for me personally, when I'm on the job these days, I like to ask my boss a lot of questions. How can I better do this? How can I improve and be more interesting in the forums? How can my lectures be more interesting and less boring or long? How can I do this, this, and this? And I like to see my boss or my teacher or my students as mentors to help me improve whatever it is I'm learning, whether it's teaching this class or writing a paper, because I feel like the more I ask for advice during the year, then I show my boss or I show the teacher that I'm curious. I show that I'm enthusiastic. I show that I'm taking initiative. And usually students who ask the most questions are the ones that get the A's. And students who don't ask as many questions, usually either they're very smart or they're just too busy. They usually end up with, if they're very smart and don't need to ask questions, they get their A. But students who are just too busy and don't bother to ask questions, those are the ones, and they get confused and they still don't bother to ask and reach out. Those are the ones that end up with lower grades. Or students who dread the peer review, or students who don't incorporate the feedback into their papers. So if I see that you did not incorporate the peer review feedback or my teacher feedback in your final draft, I will lower your grade. So that means it's important that you incorporate all of the feedback, especially the teacher feedback. And so in week 5, I will give you much more feedback than I gave in week 7, 9, and 11. Because typically after week 5, students have mastered the essay structure. And then usually in week 7, 9, and 11, I'll focus more on correcting your APA. How to do a direct quote, how to do a paraphrase quote, that sort of thing. So, be positive. Learn from your mistakes. Own your mistakes. And then show your boss your eagerness to fix those mistakes without complaining. You can do the same about your teacher feedback. This is how peer review overlaps into the workplace, okay? Because how we react to peer review feedback is the same, should be the same as how we react to any kind of feedback from our boss, from our parents, oh, that's hard, and so always maintain a growth mindset as opposed to a defensive mindset when you receive any kind of feedback. Stay curious. Focus on wanting to grow and improve. And so so in the peer review, I know I sound like I'm repeating myself, and in the peer review forum, you grow and improve in your writing skills. So have a growth mindset rather than a defensive mindset. So do you feel better about doing a peer review? Do you feel better about receiving feedback from me and your peers? So I take your silence to mean that you do feel better. So how do you receive feedback? You be a good sport, be eager, you have a growth mindset, you avoid being negative, and you seek out, just like with Star Trek, you seek out and explore where no one has gone before. Okay, so you guys aren't Trekkies or anything. I'm a Trekkie, but I'm more of a Star Trek fan than I am a Star Wars fan. How do I ask for peer review feedback? This people, most of my students, they don't know how to ask for feedback, and even though I give students the option of being able to ask, remember, when you hand in your rough draft, okay, you can also write questions at the end of your rough draft. And that's how you could ask for feedback. If you feel that your paper has certain weaknesses, you can ask other students at the end, did I do my thesis statement correctly? Can I use what other references can I use? I'm having trouble finding good references, that sort of thing. So then when students give you feedback, they can then help you answer your questions. So that's how you can ask for peer review feedback from others. So ask these questions at the bottom of your rough draft. If you think your thesis statement is weak or needs improvement, you can ask students, how's my rough draft? Can anyone help me improve it? Did I put my rough draft in the right place? Can anyone help me improve my topic sentences? Do my topic sentences relate back to my thesis statement? And just to review, what is a topic sentence? A topic sentence is the first sentence of the paragraph. And the first sentence of the paragraph relates back to your thesis. So remember that your thesis statement has 3 parts. It has a topic, opinion, reasons. And then those reasons become your topic sentences. In other words, the first sentence of each paragraph. And then the topic, then you're going to have subpoints. And those subpoints have to relate back to your topic sentences. So if your subpoints relate back to your topic sentence, and your topic sentence relates back to your thesis statement, then you have essay coherence. Do I have sentence variety? Do I have too many simple sentences? How can I vary my sentences? So in this class, I'm going to do several PowerPoints on how you can improve or revise your sentences. So basically, if you have too many simple sentences, that is, John is tall, he is Greek, we go out. So too many sentences like that together in a paragraph makes your paragraph sound too choppy. And so then you might want to combine your sentences together. And so you can combine sentences with a conjunction, you can combine sentences with a transition word, or you can combine sentences with a dependent clause. So those are the three ways off the top of my head that you can combine and vary your sentences. And I'm going to go over how to combine sentences when we do sentence structure in week 7 and when I do sentence revision in week 11. Now, if you want to know how to combine sentences sooner, you can always, and if you feel you have too many simple sentences in your paper, you can always schedule a one-on-one Zoom with me, and then I can go over your paper to see if you have good essay structure, to see if you have no grammar mistakes, and to see if you have sentence variety. Transition words. So you can ask other people, where can I add transition words for better flow? Do I repeat the same words too many times? And what transition words should I use? And so you can give each other advice on transition words, on sentence variety, essay structure. Those are some of the few ways in which you can ask other people for advice, ways in which you can improve your paper. You can ask if you think you're weak in essay structure and you're not very sure what a 5-paragraph essay structure is. You can ask the stronger writers, do I have good essay structure? And if you're a stronger writer, you can then advise the weaker writer, because I've had students who handed me rough drafts in which there were only 3 paragraphs. So then everybody was like, oh, you're supposed to write 5 paragraphs, you're missing 2 paragraphs. And then so by the end, students started sounding like teachers. In other words, they're saying, oh, you need to put your thesis statement as the last sentence of the first paragraph. So by the time people reached week 11, they were really, really good at sentence structure, writing skills, and peer review. Last but not least, because the last thing that we correct on our paper is grammar or punctuation. And after we correct for essay structure, which is revision, then we do proofreading. This is the very, very, very last step of your writing process before you hand in your paper for the final draft. So you can ask, especially if English is your second language, then you can ask, you can even say, oh, English is not my first language. So can you guys out there who are native speakers help me with my English, that sort of thing, okay? So it's okay to ask that at the end of your rough draft so that other students can help you with your paper. Here are some model peer review templates that past students have given me. Your peer review offers no criticism of the writing. So we don't have vague terms like, it's good, it sucks. So ineffective feedback is, that was interesting, the piece was informative. Ineffective feedback, the paper sucks and it was boring. So does that tell you how to improve your paper other than someone told you it's interesting and someone told you that it sucks? So effective feedback, as I said earlier, is you want to have actionable suggestions. In other words, areas of improvement where you can take action. So here, an example of effective feedback would be, first, the essay introduced the challenge of, in other words, you can summarize someone's paper and you can actually help them rewrite parts of their essay. So here somebody rewrote someone's essay. And so here they wrote, first, the essay introduced the challenge of your birth defect and how you have had to cope with it. Then in the next part, you write about, so you can just repeat what somebody wrote, and then you can help them rewrite their clumsy sentences. Here's another, so that's one way. You can give a summary evaluation, and then you can also, the reviewer assesses the ideas, the organization, and voice in the writing. Feedback should be detailed and constructive. Such a feedback should be completed with the aid of a review sheet or a checklist. As a reviewer, share actionable suggestions. So ineffective feedback, you really need to fix that opening. What were you thinking? So we don't give an attitude when we do peer review. So effective feedback, we try to say in a neutral tone, let's look closely at the opening. Could you rewrite the first sentence so that it grabs the reader's attention? Also, I'm somewhat confused by the thesis statement. Can you rephrase it? So try to keep a professional, neutral tone. We want to keep out sarcasm and irony and jokes. This is not the right place for that sort of thing. So we want to act professional. So here is a model peer review. John, you have a great topic. I agree that guns are unnecessary. Oh, and by the way, John, I don't see that you have 3 reasons in your thesis. Professor H wants you to place your thesis, wants you to have 3 reasons in your thesis. And Professor H says you need to place that thesis as the last sentence of the first paragraph. But I love the way your paper is so descriptive. Great job. And so in this particular post, this student used the sandwich method, where he has the first sentence is something positive, and then the second, then you have your areas of improvement, then you say something positive. Positive, negative, positive. That's known as the sandwich method. And so you can sandwich your areas of improvement of what you're going to say, of your coaching feedback, and sandwich it between 2 positive feedback. That is actually how teachers are taught to give feedback to students when we grade our papers, when we grade your papers, okay? You don't just simply give a litany or a list of everything that went wrong, okay? So this is a model. That models the sandwich method. Model peer review 2. Jackie, you write so much better than I do. English is not my native language, so I don't know how much I can help you. You have much better sentence structure than I do, and you use a lot of transitions. This is an example from an ESL student who spoke Spanish as her native language, so she felt uncomfortable giving peer review. And so that's one of the reasons why I created this presentation, so that even ESL students will feel comfortable to give peer review, because we all have an opinion, whether English is our first, second, or third language. Everybody has an opinion. Model peer review 3. Jack, you are missing your in-text citations. This is mainly for your second essay, because in your second essay, you have to have at least 1 in-text citation and 1 reference citation. So this comes up in week 7. Okay, a typical model peer review template for week 7 would be telling somebody that they're missing their in-text citation, and that they need to have, that Professor H says that when you cite medical facts, you have to cite the source to avoid plagiarism. You are missing quotation marks around your direct quotes. Your paraphrase quote does not need page numbers. However, you have a great thesis statement, and you followed the thesis formula to a T. Once again, this person used the feedback. Anyway, so this is typical of a week 7 or week 9 or 11. In other words, the second half of the class, in which we are going to do much more APA. And if people don't have their 1 in-text citation or their 1 reference citation, then they lose points. Lamika, and this would be an example of APA. So remember that when we write our papers, this doesn't go for your forums. So in your forums, don't worry if your paper is not indented or if it's not double spaced, because the forums doesn't have double spacing. And also, when you do the forum, just cut and paste your paper right into the search engine. We're not going to worry about the formatting as much in the forums. In the forums, we're going to focus on essay structure, APA, and essay structure, APA, and grammar. Okay, it's when you upload your assignment into the assignment portal. That's when you have to have your correct formatting. That's when you need to have double space. You need to indent the first line of every paper. So here is a model peer review in which you would say, you need to double space your paper. Why is your font bigger in one paragraph and smaller in another? All of your font needs to be the same size. remember that for an APA paper, your paper needs to be Roman, font Roman size 12, okay? Times New Roman size 12. And so if you're having trouble knowing what an APA paper looks like, you Google the words Diana Hacker, APA paper, and then you can download an APA paper and you can see what your APA paper needs to look like for your final draft and also for your rough draft as well, okay? So when you hand in your paper into the assignment portal, then you need to have correct APA formatting. So your feedback matters. Here's another model peer review. You need to rewrite your thesis as the first sentence of the last paragraph. Your paragraphs are too long. Remember, Professor H says that each paragraph needs to be 5 to 7 sentences long. So, like you, I sometimes write too much, and it is hard to cut down on my paragraphs. But I do hope you find that my suggestions are useful. Okay, so when you make comments about other people's mistakes, you can also admit that you yourself make the same mistakes too. That reinforces that everybody's in the same boat. Erica, you're missing one paragraph. In the assignment, you're supposed to have 5 paragraphs, and you only wrote 3 paragraphs. So make sure you have all 5 paragraphs. Otherwise, you've got a great thesis. So that's another example of a good post. Here's another one from someone who thinks that she's a terrible writer. I'm not a good writer. My English teacher says my papers are terrible. Whenever my papers come back, I get lots of red ink. So I don't know how much I can help you. But to me, your paper sounds good. Your paper makes sense to me, and I understand the main idea of what you're trying to write. Yeah, I don't think that, I agree with your topic. I don't think teachers should have guns in the classroom, but you have great sounding reasons. And you convinced me of your opinion. So, but I noticed that you don't have any sources. And for essay 2, we need to have at least one source. And you need, and another thing is, the more sources you have in your paper, the more credible your paper sounds. So if you have APA sources in your paper, it makes it much credible because then the reader knows you didn't just make it up off the top of your head. Another model peer review is, Mona, you have a great paper. You don't have any sources for your in-text citations. Where did you get the information from? Professor H says we have to have a source of lists, a list of sources at the end of our paper. And so another common mistake is that people would write a rough draft and not include a list of sources. And so your list of sources needs to match your in-text citation. And I will teach you about that in the second half of the class, where I will teach you what is APA and how to do APA. So here you would say, so going back to Mona, you have a great paper, but you lack in-text citations. Professor H wants us to have a list at the end of our paper. I use Google for my articles. Professor H, and if you have trouble finding sources, just ask Professor H. Just email her anytime and she will help you. Maria, your reference citation is missing parts. Professor H says that the reference citation needs an author, name, a date, an article name, a publication, date we retrieved the website, and then the web address. You cannot just have only a web address in your reference citation. You're missing a lot of parts. You can go to the Purdue OWL library. You should really check that out because they have really good APA reference citations. Otherwise, your paper looks great. You've got great essay structure, your body paragraphs have great descriptive language that appeal to all 5 senses, just like what we did in the Week 3 forum. Charnice, your body paragraphs do not relate back to your thesis. You're writing about many different things with no relation to each other, and your paper doesn't make sense. I can't tell if you're for or against abortion. What exactly is your paper about? Professor H says that the thesis statement should be TOR, topic, opinion, reasons. She says that if you follow TOR, your paper will make sense. So you should ask her about this. Model peer review 11. Christina, you're using too many statistics in a row. Professor H says that we can only use one in-text citation per paragraph. Remember, she taught us about pie structure. You need to watch her pie structure video in the announcements. And until I learned pie structure, I also was writing too many statistics in a row. What is pie structure? Well, Professor H says pie structure is P. P is the main point from the thesis statement. I, one in-text citation. E, an explanation of that in-text citation in 5 sentences. And Professor H has a whole video on pie structure in the announcements. My problem is that I put too many statistics. I wish I could do research much better. But thanks to Professor H, I'm getting much better at my research papers. Oh, I see no mistakes in your paper, Latanya. You have a great thesis. I agree that everyone should get vaccinated against COVID-19. I'm worried about these variants. You use great reasons too, Latanya, about why people should get vaccinated, like they can stop the spread of COVID. And if everyone gets vaccinated, we can maybe get herd immunity. Your reasons are just like your thesis, just like Professor H wants. I think your paper is perfect. So if you're stuck on a source, you can ask other students for help. If you're stuck on your thesis, you can ask other students for help. So I said this before. You could say, I can't come up with a good thesis. Can somebody help me out? I can't find sources for my paper. Can somebody help me do it? So did these peer reviews help you write a peer review? What will your peer review praise post sound like? And so praise meaning the appreciation feedback, and also the help the student post, meaning you can actually ask others for help if you get stuck. And so basically, when we do peer review, you realize that we're not in this alone. So when we get into the peer review week, here are the steps for your peer review week forum. First, post your rough draft to the peer review forum before Wednesday so that students have time to give you feedback. The more complete your rough draft is, the better feedback you will get. Do not make all your posts on Sunday because then students will not have time to give you feedback on your posts. And also you'll get late penalty points if you post your first draft after Wednesday. The earlier you post, the more feedback you get. Remember, feedback is your friend. Do not just post your rough draft and your 2 posts and then forget about the peer review forum. Even after you finish your required post, go back often to the peer review forum to help students if students ask questions or need help. Also, keep up with the feedback others have given you, and also take a look at the teacher feedback that I will be color coding into the week 5 forum. Help others with their thesis statement, essay structure, APA citations, or reference citations if you already know APA. Second, throughout the week, check back to see if anyone has given you feedback, especially my feedback. So third, you have until Sunday to post to 2 other students. So remember, when we do forums, we have 2 different deadlines. You have until Wednesday in order to post your first post. Then you have until Sunday to post to 2 students. So include the feedback corrections to the final draft of your paper and also to your rough draft. If you do not include my teacher feedback, you will lose points on your final grade. What steps do you take to do in a peer review forum? So when week 5 comes along, that's in 2 more weeks, that's going to be your very first peer review forum. And so when we do the peer review forum, you're going to post your initial post, that is your rough draft, and just cut and paste it into the forum. Don't worry about the double spacing for the forums. And then that way, students have from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to give you feedback. And then I can give you feedback. Then you have until Sunday to post it to students. How do we use peer review in the real world? Professional peer review focuses on the performance of professionals with a view to improving quality, upholding standards, or providing certification. In academia, peer review is used to inform in decisions related to faculty advancement and tenure. And so in academia, if you want to stay hired, then you would publish. You would publish articles, publish books, and then you publish them to professional journals. And then the professional journals decide whether or not your article is good enough for their journal. So what happens is an entire committee or one person will read your paper and then decide, is this paper good or not good enough for their journal? If it's not good enough, the editor will send back your paper and ask for corrections. That's how you have peer review, and then after you make the corrections, you resend the paper back to the editor or to that journal, and then they publish it. So that's how peer review works in the real world. And for many professors, they have to keep publishing to stay hired. So in some schools, faculty peer review each other's work or each other's online classes. When I worked for the University of Phoenix, I would look at other teachers' classrooms, and other teachers would look at my classroom to check on my job performance, and I would check on other people's job performance. So let's say I enter someone's classroom and I notice, gee, this teacher never talks in the forums. It's like she's absent. She never grades their student papers. She's got a list of emails, 100 emails she has not answered. I think that this teacher needs mentoring or coaching. And if she doesn't improve with the mentoring or coaching, fired. So that's peer review when you peer review each other's job performance, okay? And so far in academia, peer review is used to publish papers, to see if your paper is good enough for publishing. Then you make corrections, and then you send it in again, the improved version, and that way, then you get it published. And also peer review is you evaluate other people's classrooms. And so in an online environment, I would be given access to other people's online classrooms. And then I would then evaluate whether or not that teacher is participating in her forums, grading her papers. And I remember face-to-face, when I used to teach face-to-face, I would visit other teachers' classrooms, and we would have a board, clipboard, and there would be a checklist, and then we have to check, are the students paying attention? Are the students on task? Is the teacher teaching her class? In other words, or do we have romper room where everyone's jumping around and not paying attention to the teacher? So in the face-to-face classroom, especially K through 12, how well a teacher teaches is how well your students are staying on task, paying attention to the teacher. If the students are all talking and the teacher's talking and the students are talking, then you get a low grade. Then you give somebody a minus. But if nobody is talking and all intently looking at the teacher with interest, not bored, okay, not disinterest, and not falling asleep, because if you have people falling asleep, you also get a minus, okay? Everyone has to be looking at the teacher intently with interest, buying into the lesson, okay? Then you get high scores from the supervisors. And so as I climbed up in rank to the senior ranks, part of my job was to look at the junior teachers and see how well they were keeping their students interested, how well they were engaging their students. And in that way, that's the only overlap to when I was peer reviewing how teachers are peer reviewed in online teaching. In other words, how often does the teacher engage the students in the forums? and how much do the students respond to the teacher's questions, that sort of thing. So that's peer review. Here's an example of how teachers would peer review not only each other's work, but each other's classroom, so that we can all become better teachers. Scholarly peer review is the process of subjecting an author's scholarly work or research or ideas to the scrutiny of others who are experts in the same field. So before a paper is published, the peer review helps the publisher decide whether the work should be accepted, considered, or rejected. Oh, going back, well, I'm not going to go back. Okay, and so when teachers or other professionals publish a paper, other teachers read your paper to see if your paper is good enough to be published. So I have looked over other teachers' articles before deciding to reject that or accept that paper because I used to write a school newsletter, and I remember teachers were free to submit articles to the faculty newsletter, and I remember I had to write a monthly newsletter to tell all the faculty what's going on in the department month by month. And so when teachers wanted to submit their little article, I had to make sure that the article fit the style of the newsletter, fit the criteria of the newsletter. And if I said, well, your article needs to be a little longer, or your article needs to be more paragraphs, that sort of thing, that's a kind of peer review. Okay, when people submit things and then you tell them it needs improvement before you get final approval of publication. Government policy peer review. And so different governments would peer review each other's policies. Different parts of the U.S. government review each other's policy. For example, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, through UNECE Environmental Performance Review, uses peer review or peer learning to evaluate the progress made by member countries in improving environmental policies. And so different countries peer review how much pollution or carbon footprint they leave behind to control climate control. And they're saying that the United States not doing a very good job in their carbon. In other words, other countries, like in Europe, they're saying that the United States is very wasteful because the Americans are not very adept at leaving less of a carbon footprint compared to Europeans. So that's one way in which we peer review each other in a kind of friendly competition so that everybody can improve how much of a carbon footprint they leave behind. Medical peer review. Clinical peer review is a procedure for assessing patients' involvement with experience of care. It is a piece of progressing proficient practice assessment and centered proficient practice. In other words, different, the senior nurses would review how the junior nurses are doing their jobs, okay? And then the senior nurses would then say, okay, you need to do this and this and this better to the junior nurses. And so just like with teachers, where I would peer review other teacher classrooms, then senior nurses or senior doctors or senior medical staff would peer review and tell the junior medical staff how to better do their jobs. And this is an example of, I don't know if you know, but as a nurse, you can also write for different nursing journals if you want to be published, especially if you want to go in and become a nursing teacher, and eventually if you want to go into academia. Just like your professor. Some of your professors are teaching you the basics of nursing. And someday, when you become a senior nurse, you might decide you want to be a teacher too, so then you would need to have to publish into a nursing journal. And also another thing about publishing is it really looks good on your resume to have things published, because it makes you stand out from other people, because other nurses will have a whole array of experiences in medical experiences at different places, but you would stand out because you also have an article published in a nursing journal. That makes you look scholarly. smart, and educated. Here's an example of how an article is sent to many different places. So a researcher submits the article to a journal. Article is sent to several experts in the expert field. Then the article is reviewed for accuracy, originality, and flaws in argumentation. Then the last one, our article is accepted for publication, returned to author for revision, or simply rejected. That's peer review in the real world. And in engineering, just like with teachers and nurses, each engineer would peer review anonymously, sometimes it's anonymously, each other's work. And so then each engineer would, that way, technical peer reviews are a well-defined review process for finding and fixing defects conducted by a team of peers with assigned roles. Technical peer reviews are carried out by peers representing different cycles, different life cycles of whatever it is they're making. It's usually limited to 6 or fewer people. Technical peer reviews are held within development phases, milestone reviews, completed products, or completed portion of products. So a good friend of mine is an engineer, and he gets reviewed from his fellow engineers all the time. They would anonymously fill in or fill out a job performance review to discuss each other's job performance. And they always tell him that he gets too easily aggravated at work. He hates these peer reviews because he doesn't know he's always trying to guess. And he would always tell me, and they tell me I get too aggravated at work. Well, he does get too aggravated. So that's why when he doesn't receive feedback very well, because he just gets aggravated when he gets, his peer review. And so the better way to receive peer review is to be positive. Because if you're aggravated at work, people will tell you that's a negative trait, which is what happened to him, okay? So always be positive. And other kinds of peer review that you may not think of as peer review is like if you're on Amazon, for instance, you buy a product and then it falls apart in just 2 seconds. Then you're going to peer review and comment to everybody on Yelp and say, don't waste your money to buy this product because it falls apart in 2 seconds. That's another example of how peer review is used in the real world, is when you rate something. And at every teaching job I've ever had, I've had either good or bad job performances. And where I get feedback on how well or how badly I have been teaching. And my boss would rate me as below expectations, meets expectations, exceeds expectations. 2.8 is a low score, 5.0 is the perfect score. How do you react when you get a 2.8? Do you freak out and get angry and become defensive? And say, I deserve positive comments. I couldn't have done everything wrong. Or do you own up to your mistakes, swallow your pride, and then you just say, okay, how do you want me to improve this, this, and this? Which do you think the boss likes best? So this is an example, and so if you're the boss, so let's say you're the boss, okay, and you're the one that's going to give somebody a job performance review. Well, just telling somebody they suck is not really helpful. Just like when you say someone's paper sucks. When you give someone's job review, you suck, then that's not going to help that person, okay, improve his job. You need to give actionable suggestions. Here's an example. So let's say Tina talks like this, and I'm going to give you a presentation about climate change, And climate change is a very serious problem in the world, And I have done a lot of research about this topic, And anyway, she has a very good presentation, but she has an annoying habit of, And so telling Tina simply, your language is too conversational. You need to improve it. You suck. Then Tina's like, my conversation, my language is bad? How? Instead, you want to give an actionable suggestion, like, Tina, you need to stop saying "you know" at the end of every sentence. That is so annoying. That's an example of an actionable suggestion Tina can use. And once Tina stops saying "you know," she got an A rating for everything she did. This is a true example of, I actually had a colleague who went through this. Everybody hated her. You know. Anyway, so as I was saying, other examples of peer review is a customer review. So here somebody is, when you give a review about a product, that's a peer review because you're reviewing how well or how good this product is. If you go to a website like Yelp, you can find, okay, what restaurant has been rated really, really well and what restaurant has been rated really, really bad. So these are all examples of how peer review is used in the real world. This is it. This is the end of this lecture. You're like, oh, finally, she stops talking. Yeah, okay. So here I've given you how peer review is given and what have you learned from this presentation. Does this presentation help you understand what peer review forums are for? Does this peer review presentation help you lessen your fear of posting to the peer review forum? Are you afraid of the peer review forum? Are you nervous about doing a peer review? And so hopefully, I'm hoping that all of you have, if you can't attend the Zoom session, I'm hoping that you can watch my video in portions. Hopefully, you can watch my video in 20-minute portions. And that way, because for me, whenever I watch somebody else's Zoom video, I always watch in 20, 30-minute portions, because that's about the limit of my attention span. And so I guess with this video, you can watch it in 2 or 3 sittings. And that way you get the idea. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you get a good idea of what is a peer review and how to do a peer review. If you have any questions, you can always email me. See you next week.